Today's podcast is sponsored by lighthousepowerbusiness.com.
June 15th, Kimo.
God can turn a place of senseless death into a place of life. Dark green leaves spilled from the jungle on either side of the muddy trail that Kimo and about 20 others walked. Marge Saint and her two older children, Steve and Kathy, had chosen the destination. They were hiking into the sandbar where, 8 years before, Nate Saint, her husband, and their father had been killed and buried by Kimo and others. They crossed a ridge, forded streams, descended toward a river, and dug out canoes poled downstream. When Kimo stepped out of the canoe onto the sandbar, memories rushed at him. Here the foreigners had shouted in his language, "We are your friend," but he, along with Daiwi and Minkaye and 3 others, had spear-killed the men who had given them gifts. The men had guns, but they didn't shoot them. The men who had cried, "Why are you doing this?" Kimo's heart hurt. His tribe, the Waodani, had once been the most violent society on earth. Now, because of Wanganji, their native word for the Creator's Son, Jesus Christ, they had changed. Kimo looked at Steve and Kathy's Aunt Rachel. When she had come to live with the people who had killed her brother, it had surprised Kimo. She had told them Wanganji's son came down to the dirt to save his people from the darkness in their hearts. Kimo believed her, and he stood taller. Tomorrow, he and the others would give this place new memories. Kimo scanned the beach. Jaguar tracks printed in the sand, and it was growing dark. Some of the Waodani gathered cane poles with palm fronds to make shelters, and others fished for supper. Evening mist settled, the fires burned, and the monkey meat and fish stewed in pots. The next morning, the group gathered for a holy ceremony. The light-skinned children who visited during school vacations would be baptized with 2 Waodani teens. Kathy and Steve had honored Kimo and Daiwi by asking the men to baptize them because Wanganji's son had changed the warriors into God followers. Kimo spoke to Wanganji. Seasons and seasons ago, he prayed, "We came here to do a bad thing that made your heart cry. But now look, we have come back to this same sand place to make your heart happy." After the prayer, Kimo and Daiwi lowered the children into the river. When they raised the children, the water ran off. Their faces were bright. Kimo told them to follow God's trail, living happily and at peace. Afterwards, the warriors led the family into the edge of the jungle. They pointed to a tree stump. This is where the 5 foreign God followers built their sleeping house when they came to bring us God carvings and teach us to live well, they said. It is also where the God followers were buried. Look, Marge pointed to the ground where 4 plants with bright red flowers grew. Wouldn't it have been special if there had been 5? "But Mother," said Steve, "wasn't Ed's body found and buried farther downriver?" About 10 feet downriver from the treehouse stump, they saw another plant with the same bright red blossom. In John 10:10, Jesus told us, "The thief's purpose is to steal and kill and destroy. My purpose is to give them a rich and satisfying life." Do you have a place of death, literal or metaphorically, that needs to become a place of life? Ask God to take your death place from the clutches of destruction and remake it into something good. God can turn a place of senseless death into a place of life. Amen. June 15th. Chuck Stecker here with The Chosen Generation. as the executive director, but also the teaching pastor at the Summit Church in Centennial, Colorado. I don't know how you can read or listen to the story of Kimo and Nate Saint's kids without choking up on that one. You know, when you look at 1965, the story says 8 years earlier, it was Kimo with other warriors from this very vicious and violent tribe that had been taught from a very young age it's either kill or be killed, that they speared to death Nate Saint, the pilot, and other men in that party who were trying to say we are friends. But here it is 8 years later, with Nate Saint's kids, with Kimo, to go to the exact place that this atrocity had taken place, and then step into the water and allow Kimo to baptize them. You know, when I think about this, and there's so much, the story of transformation, what happened in Kimo that only God could do, no one would have expected that 8 years earlier. And then I think of what did it take for his kids, Nate Saint's kids, to forgive Kimo, go and seek him out, and allow this man who had literally killed their own father and made them orphans to forgive him. Wow. You know, when you think about it in life, I guess the first thing that we have to think about as men is, what will it take for us to forgive? You know, sometimes we think it's our right and we hold this grudge, and, you know, we can go through all of these different things, can't we? What will it take for us to forgive? You know, it's been said, and again, it's not me, but it's, you know, when you fail to forgive someone, it's like taking poison and expecting the other person to die. You know, there's so much to that. But the idea right now is, where do you need to forgive someone? Who do you need to forgive? And what's it going to take for you to step forward boldly and trust God and forgive that person? God bless you guys.
Today's podcast is sponsored by lighthousepowerbusiness.com. Get your free strategy session valued at $1,000. Get expert advice and take your business to the next level. Visit lighthousepowerbusiness.com to schedule your session today.